The desert wind howled through the cracked windows of the run-down motel on the outskirts of Red Hollow, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and regret. Inside room 7, Isaac Wrench Calder hunched over the scarred wooden table, his calloused hands fiddling with the guts of an old carburetor. At 48, he was a man built like the machines he fixed, solid, unyielding, etched with lines from too many miles on the road. The iron promise patch on his leather vest hung heavy, a reminder of oaths sworn in blood and chrome. But tonight the quiet was shattered by a soft scrape at the door, like a whisper from the grave. He froze, the wrench slipping from his fingers. No one knocked at dives like this. Visitors meant trouble. Rising slowly, his boots thudding against the threadbare carpet, Isaac cracked the door. Nothing. Just the empty lot bathed in the sodium glow of a flickering street lamp. Then he saw it. A faded Polaroid slid beneath the threshold like a secret too heavy to speak aloud. He knelt, retrieving it with fingers that trembled despite himself. The photo showed a young woman, mid-20s, her dark hair whipping in the wind as she leaned against a motorcycle that mirrored his own. Same midnight black frame, same custom exhaust he'd welded years ago. She smiled at the camera, eyes bright with the kind of hope that summer promises. But there was a shadow behind her, a run-down barn on the edge of town, the kind locals whispered about. The date scrawled on the back, last July. The summer before she vanished. Isaac's breath caught. That bike. It was hers. His niece, Lena, the one he'd lost track of after his brother's death. Heart pounding, he scanned the lot. There, across the gravel expanse, a small figure huddled on the curb under the motel's sagging awning. A girl, no more than 11, knees drawn to her chest, watching him with eyes too steady for her age. June, his brother's daughter, the one he'd sworn to protect. He stepped out, the cool night air biting at his skin, gravel crunching underfoot like brittle bones. The motel sign buzzed overhead, casting erratic shadows that danced like ghosts. June didn't flinch as he approached. She just held out a crumpled note, her small hand unwavering. "It's Aunt Lena," she said, voice flat but laced with something fierce. "They took her. The ones who run this town said she knew too much about their land grabs, coerced folks to sign away their homes, silenced anyone who fought back." Isaac took the note, his mind reeling back to that rainy night 5 years ago. His brother Jake lay dying in a hospital bed after a freak accident on the mill road, pushed off by the same corrupt hands that now gripped Red Hollow. "Promise me, Wrench," Jake had rasped, gripping his arm. "Look after June if anything happens to me. She's all I've got left. Family's what you choose, brother. Don't let me down." Isaac had nodded, the weight of it settling like lead. But grief and the road had pulled him away. He'd failed, until this photo, this girl, dragged the promise back to life. "Why now?" he asked, crouching to her level. The scent of dust and her faint strawberry shampoo mingled in the air. June's face was pale, marked by faint shadows under her eyes, signs of nights spent hiding, perhaps from the same shadows that claimed Lena. "Because you're the only one who can," she replied, her voice a quiet blade. "Iron promise, you keep your word. Aunt Lena said so. She left this for you before they came. Said if I ever needed help, find the uncle with the wrench tattoo." She pointed to the faded ink on his forearm, a relic from his mechanic days. Isaac glanced at the photo again. The woman smiled, twisting like a knife in his gut. Red Hollow wasn't just a town. It was a web of lies, where the sheriff's office turned a blind eye to developers seizing family lands under false pretenses, forcing silence with threats and worse. Lena must have uncovered something. Records, maybe, or witnesses that threatened their grip. And now, June was here, alone, slipping evidence under doors like a tiny rebel. He straightened, the first stirrings of resolve hardening in his chest. "Go inside, kid. Lock the door." I'll make some calls." But as she scampered back to the shadows of the lot, Isaac felt the pull of that old oath, unbreakable as the chains on his bike. Dawn was hours away, but already the horizon hinted at change. By midnight, his phone hummed to life. One by one, the brothers of Iron Promise responded, veterans like him, bound by scars and shared silences. "On our way," came the gravelly voice of Jax, the club's enforcer, from 200 miles north. "Sunrise, full convoy." No questions, no hesitation. That's what family chosen meant, engines roaring not for war, but for truth. Isaac pocketed the photo, the paper warm against his chest like a heartbeat. He stepped onto the motel's rickety porch, the desert stretching out dark and endless. Far off, a coyote's cry echoed, lonely but defiant. Red Hollow thought it had buried its secrets deep, but promises like his had a way of digging them up. As the first stars faded, he knew this wasn't just about Lena or June. It was about honoring the dead, mending the broken, and facing down the corruption that poisoned everything it touched. The lot fell silent again, save for the distant hum of the highway. Isaac lit a cigarette, the flame flickering like a vow renewed. Come morning, the roar would come, not to shatter, but to reveal. The first blush of dawn crept over the jagged horizon like a hesitant promise, painting the desert in hues of bruised purple and gold. Isaac stood on the motel's sagging porch, the cigarette long since burned to ash between his fingers, its bitter smoke lingering in the crisp air. The photo of Lena weighed heavy in his vest pocket, a talisman against the chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. June had slipped inside room 7 hours ago, the door bolted tight, but he could feel her presence like a shadow at his back, small, unyielding, demanding he get this right. A low rumble stirred the silence first, faint as thunder rolling in from the Badlands. Then it grew, a symphony of engines swelling from the east, disciplined and unhurried. Isaac's pulse quickened. He knew that sound better than his own heartbeat. Iron Promise wasn't a gang. They were a brotherhood forged in the fires of forgotten wars and broken roads. No wild revving, no show of force, just the steady growl of Harleys and Indians, tires whispering over asphalt like secrets shared in the dark. They appeared as silhouettes against the rising sun, a convoy of 24 bikes cresting the hill into Red Hollow's outskirts. Jax led the pack, his broad frame cutting through the wind, salt and pepper beard tucked into a bandana. Behind him rode the others, Marco, the quiet medic with hands steady as a surgeon's, Reyes, the ex-cop who'd traded his badge for leathers after seeing too much rot in the system, and the rest, faces weathered by sun and sorrow, patches gleaming like badges of honor. They pulled into the motel's lot in a loose arc, engines cutting off one by one until the world held its breath. Jax dismounted first, boots hitting gravel with a solid thud. He clasped Isaac's forearm in a grip that spoke volumes. No words needed for men who'd buried brothers together. "Got the call at 0200, he said, voice gravel rough from years of shouting over engines. "What's the play? Wrench?" Isaac nodded toward the motel room, where June peeked through the curtains, her wide eyes reflecting the dawn's light. "It's family," he replied simply, pulling out the photo. He handed it over, watching Jax's face harden as he studied Lena's smile, the bike that screamed of shared history. Jake's girl. And his niece. They took Lena last summer. Land grabs, silencing voices. June says it's the whole town tangled in it. Sheriff, developers, the works. The brothers gathered close, the air thick with the scent of hot metal and leather warmed by the sun. Marco took the photo next, his dark eyes narrowing. "That barn in the back. I've heard whispers. Old mill property, seized under some bogus eminent domain. Folks losing homes. Farms turned to dust for strip malls that never come." He passed it on, each man absorbing the image like a battle map. faces etched with the quiet fury of those who'd once worn uniforms and now wore vows. June emerged then, stepping into the light with the caution of someone who'd learned trust was a luxury. The convoy's arrival had drawn her out, her small frame swallowed by an oversized hoodie that smelled faintly of motor oil, Lena's, no doubt. She met their gazes without flinching, a spark of defiance cutting through her fear. "Aunt Lena found papers," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Deeds, signatures forced at gunpoint. She was going to take it to the state, but they got wind. Said if she talked, June'd be next." The words hung heavy, the desert wind tugging at her hair like an urging hand. Reyes knelt to her level, his badge days evident in the gentle authority of his tone. "You did good, kid. Slipping that under the door, brave as hell. We're here because Wrench called. Iron Promise doesn't ride for revenge. We ride for what's right." He glanced at Isaac, a silent question in his eyes. Isaac felt the old promise coil tighter in his chest, Jake's dying words echoing, "Family's what you choose." He'd run from it once, burying the guilt under miles of blacktop, but no more. This girl, this photo, they were the tether pulling him back. The group moved as one toward their bikes, the plan forming in nods and murmurs, no storming the sheriff's office. There was a fool's errand against entrenched power. Instead, they'd start quiet, canvass the edges of Red Hollow, talk to the silenced, piece together the threads Lena had begun to unravel. Isaac mounted his ride, the familiar vibration thrumming through his bones like a second pulse. June climbed on behind him, her arms wrapping around his waist with surprising strength, her cheek pressed to the Iron Promise patch. "She believed in you," she whispered over the wind as they rolled out. The convoy snaked through Red Hollow's sun-baked streets, past faded diners and boarded-up shops, the engines a low hymn that turned heads but sparked no fear, just wary glances from porch-sitters who'd long ago learned to keep their mouths shut. They stopped first at the old mill road, where Jake had met his end. The site was overgrown now, weeds choking the guardrail like forgotten accusations. Isaac dismounted, the gravel biting into his soles, and traced the faded skid marks with his boot. "Here," he said to the group, voice low. They said accident, but Jake was careful, too careful. Jax scanned the horizon, spotting the distant silhouette of the barn from the photo. "That's our thread. Let's pull it." As they approached, the air grew thicker, laced with the metallic tang of rust and something sharper, decay perhaps, or the rot of secrets. A chain-link fence barred the way, topped with barbed wire that glinted menacingly. Reyes tested the gate, finding it unlocked, a careless slip or an invitation to trouble. Inside, the barn loomed like a hollow witness, its walls scarred by time and neglect. Dust motes danced in the slanting light as they fanned out, boots echoing on the packed earth. Marco found it first, a loose floorboard in the corner, pried up to reveal a metal box half buried in the dirt. Inside lay a sheaf of papers, forged deeds, witness statements scribbled in haste, photos of bruised faces and empty lots. Lena's handwriting scrawled across one, "They own the sheriff. Follow the money to the mayor's safe." Isaac's hands shook as he sifted through them, the weight of redemption settling like dust on his skin. This was more than evidence. It was a map to the heart of the corruption, a chance to honor Jake and shield June. But voices drifted from outside. Tires on gravel, a radio crackling with authority, the sheriff's deputies drawn by the convoy's rumble. Tension coiled in the air, thick as the shadows lengthening across the barn floor. Jax met Isaac's eyes, a silent vow passing between them. No drawing lines in the sand, not yet. They pocketed the papers, melting back into the light with June in tow. Engines firing up like a chorus of resolve. As they rode out, the deputies' lights flashing in the rear view, Isaac felt the first true stir of hope. The promise wasn't just words anymore. It was motion, unbreakable, cutting through the lies like dawn through the dark. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The engines thrummed like a heartbeat under the relentless desert sun, the convoy weaving through Red Hollow's cracked back streets with purposeful restraint. Isaac gripped the handlebars, June's small form pressed against his back, her breath steady despite the wind whipping past. The papers from the barn burned in his inner pocket, fragile as hope but sharp as accusation. Behind them, the deputy's sirens wailed faintly, a distant echo swallowed by the horizon. No pursuit yet, just a warning growl, enough to remind everyone who held the reins in this town. But Iron Promise didn't run. They measured their steps, turning pursuit into pursuit of their own. They pulled into the shadow of an abandoned gas station on the town's frayed edge. Pumps rusted like forgotten sentinels, the air heavy with the ghost of spilled fuel and faded dreams. Jax signaled a halt, the bike settling into a loose circle, dust swirling in lazy eddies around their tires. The brothers dismounted, faces set in lines of quiet determination, leather creaking as they formed a protective ring around June. She slid off Isaac's bike, her sneakers scuffing the gravel, eyes darting toward the empty road. "They'll come looking," she said, voice barely above the settling hum of cooling engines. "The sheriff's men. They watch everything." Isaac nodded, pulling out the sheaf of documents. The top page fluttered in the breeze, a deed to the old mill, signed with a shaky hand that screamed coercion. "We know," he replied, his tone even, like the steady tick of a well-tuned motor. "But knowledge is our weapon now. Lena started this thread. We're just following it." He passed the papers to Reyes, who scanned them with the precision of his badge days, brow furrowing under the brim of his weathered hat. Reyes whistled low, the sound cutting through the tension like a blade. "This isn't just land grabs. Look here, transfers routed through shell companies, payoffs to the mayor's office, and these statements." He held up a yellowed sheet, ink smudged but legible. Folks pressured to sell, threats to their kids if they didn't. One name keeps popping up, Harlan Voss, the developer pulling strings from that big house on the hill. Lena must have crossed him, pieced it together from county records she snuck into the clerk's office. The group leaned in, the scent of sun-baked asphalt mingling with the faint tang of gun oil from Marco's saddlebag. Tools for mending, not harming. Jax crossed his arms, his massive frame casting a long shadow. "We ride loud, we draw heat, but quiet words spread farther. Who do we talk to first? The silenced ones?" June stepped forward, her hoodie sleeves tugged over her knuckles, a barrier against the world's rough edges. "Miss Ilara," she said without hesitation. "She runs the diner on Main. Lost her farm last year. Aunt Lena visited her before they took her. Said Ilara had a ledger, hidden receipts that match these papers." The girl's words carried the weight of secrets too big for her shoulders, but her gaze held steady, mirroring the unyielding chrome of the bikes around her. Isaac felt a pang, sharp as a loose chain link. Jake's promise echoed in his mind. Look after June. He'd let years slip by, chasing horizons to outrun the guilt of that hospital room, the rain pattering against the window like unanswered prayers. But here, in this dusty circle of brothers, the road led back, to family chosen, to oaths that rusted but never broke. "Lead the way, kid," he said, mounting up. The convoy reformed, engines coughing to life in a controlled roar that vibrated through the ground, a declaration without aggression. The diner squatted on Main Street like a weary survivor, its neon sign flickering Ilara's in half-hearted invitation. They parked out front, the bikes lining the curb in a row that turned curious eyes from passing trucks. Inside, the air was thick with the aroma of strong coffee and sizzling bacon, Formica counters scarred by countless regrets. Ilara, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair, pinned back and eyes like weathered granite, froze mid-pour behind the counter. Her gaze flicked from the iron promise patches to June, recognition dawning like a slow sunrise. "You brought them," Ilara murmured, setting down the pot with a clatter. She wiped her hands on her apron, the fabric threadbare as her patience. The few patrons, truckers nursing mugs, shifted uneasily but said nothing, the weight of the town's silence pressing down. June nodded, sliding onto a stool. He kept his word. "This is Uncle Isaac and his crew." The brothers filed in, taking seats at the far end, orders for black coffee, keeping things civil. Isaac approached the counter, laying a single paper from the bundle face up, a forged signature on Ilara's farm deed. "Lena sent us," he said quietly, the words landing like gravel on still water. "She left a trail. We found more in the barn." Ilara's face paled, her knuckles whitening on the counter's edge. She glanced at the door, where the afternoon light slanted through grimy windows, casting bars of shadow across the checkered floor. "That girl. She came here last spring, asking questions. I showed her my copies, receipts for consulting fees that went straight to Voss's pockets. The sheriff's deputy leaned on me after, said it'd be best to forget." Her voice cracked, the pain of loss threading through like oil in water. "Lost everything. My home, the land my daddy worked. For what? Condos that stand empty." Marco leaned in from his stool, his medic's calm a steady anchor. "You're not alone anymore. These papers link it all. Your farm, the mill, Jake's accident. Coercion, not choice. We take this to light, not fists. Witnesses like you, that's the break." Outside, a patrol car slowed past the diner, tires hissing on the pavement, the deputy's stare lingering through the glass. Tension rippled through the room, the brothers' hands inching toward their belts, not for weapons but for resolve. Jax met the gaze through the window, unblinking, until the car rolled on. Ilara exhaled, reaching under the register to pull out a worn ledger, its pages dog-eared and stained. "Take it, but if Voss finds out, we'll shield you," Isaac promised, the word solid as the wrench tattoo on his arm. He tucked the ledger away, feeling June's hand slip into his, a small anchor in the storm. This wasn't vengeance, it was justice, pieced together in whispers and ledgers, exposing the rot one thread at a time. As they stepped back into the glare, the convoy mounting up, a low whistle cut the air, Jax spotting dust clouds on the approach from town centre, more deputies or Voss's private muscle closing the net. Isaac revved his engine, the vibration a call to motion. "To the safe house," he called over the growl. "Reyes, you know a spot." The ex-cop nodded, leading them toward the arroyos beyond Red Hollow, where scrub brush hid forgotten trails. June clung tighter as they accelerated, the wind carrying the faint scent of impending rain, a rarity in these parts, like truth breaking through drought. The papers and ledger bounced against Isaac's chest, a map to redemption. Jake's voice lingered in the rush. "Don't let me down." For the first time, Isaac felt the weight lift, replaced by purpose. The corruption thought it owned the shadows, but iron promise brought the dawn, one careful mile at a time. They vanished into the twisting paths, engines fading into the vastness, leaving Red Hollow to stew in its unease. But the threads were pulling tighter, the promise unfolding like a road, unwinding toward light. The arroyos beyond Red Hollow twisted like veins in the earth's cracked skin. Dry riverbeds choked with thorny mesquite and sun-bleached stones that whispered of long-forgotten floods. Reyes led the convoy down a hidden trail, his bike carving a path through the scrub, where the land dipped into shadow, away from prying eyes and the town's grasping reach. Isaac followed close, June's grip on his waist, a steady reminder of the fragile cargo they carried. Not just the girl, but the bundle of papers and Ilara's ledger, tucked secure against the roar of the wind. The engine's low growl echoed off the canyon walls, a rhythmic pulse that drowned out the distant wail of sirens fading into irrelevance. They pulled into a shallow alcove, a natural hollow shielded by overhanging rock and tangled vines, the kind of spot that had served as a way station for wanderers and outlaws alike. The air here was cooler, laced with the earthy tang of damp soil hidden beneath the desert's facade, and the sudden quiet as the bikes shut down felt like a held breath. Jax dismounted first, scanning the perimeter with the instincts of a man who'd patrolled worse borders. "Clear," he grunted, his voice bouncing softly off the stone. The brothers followed, forming a loose perimeter, while Marco helped June off the bike, his gentle hands steadying her as if she were a patient in recovery. Isaac swung his leg over, boots sinking into the soft gravel, and pulled out the documents. The ledger's cover was cracked leather, its pages yellowed like old skin, but the entries inside were meticulous. Dates, amounts, names crossed out in frantic ink. He spread them on a flat boulder, the afternoon sun slanting through the arroyo like a spotlight on a stage of reckoning. June knelt beside him, her small fingers tracing a line, a payment to the sheriff's office, time-stamped the week before Lena's disappearance. "She copied this for me," June said, her voice a thread in the still air. "Hid it under the floorboards at home, said if anything happened, it was the key." Reyes crouched down, his ex-cop eyes dissecting the ledger like a crime scene. The scent of sagebrush mingled with the faint metallic bite from the bike's exhaust, grounding the moment in something tangible amid the swirl of revelations. "Voss isn't just grabbing land," he murmured, flipping to a section marked with red tabs. "He's laundering through fake charities, donations that never reach the needy, funneled back to buy silence. Look, Jake's accident report, buried here as routine. But the payout line? It traces to Voss's account. Your brother wasn't pushed by chance, wrench. He was digging too, same as Lena. Found out the Mill Road seizure was the start of it all." Isaac's jaw tightened, the words landing like a wrench slipped into gears, grinding against the rust of old guilt. Jake's face flashed in his mind, pale under the hospital fluorescence. Voice ragged as he extracted that promise. Look after June. Family's what you choose. He'd chosen the road instead. Miles of blacktop blurring the edges of failure, but the arroyo's isolation stripped away the excuses. This evidence wasn't abstract. It was a bridge from past to present, linking his brother's end to Lena's vanishing, and now to the girl watching him with eyes that demanded he step up. "He called me weeks before," Isaac admitted, his voice rough as sandpaper. "Said something big was brewing in Red Hollow. Told me to stay clear, handle my own ghosts. I didn't listen close enough." The brothers gathered around the boulder, their shadows merging into one long form that stretched toward the arroyo wall. Marco pulled a small toolkit from his pack, not for repairs, but for preservation, sealing the papers in waterproof bags with the care of a surgeon closing a wound. Jax paced the edge of the circle, his heavy steps kicking up puffs of dust that danced in the light. "We got enough to crack this wide," he said, stopping to fix Isaac with a steady gaze. "But exposure means risk. Voss has pull, state connections maybe. We go public too soon. They bury it deeper, or come for June." June straightened, her hoodie slipping back to reveal a faint bruise on her cheek, faded now, but a silent testament to the threats that had driven her to the motel. "They already came," she said, the words cutting through the men's murmurs like a clear bell. "After Aunt Lena said if I talked I'd end up like her, but she taught me. Truth don't hide forever. It's like oil. It seeps out." Her voice held a quiet fire, inherited from the women who'd raised her amid the town's creeping shadows, and it stirred something in Isaac, a resolve hardening like cooling metal. A rustle from the trail snapped their attention, pebbles shifting under cautious feet. Reyes drew his hand to his belt, but it was no deputy. A figure emerged from the scrub, lean and dust-covered, hands raised in a gesture of peace. It was Thomas, an old rancher from the outskirts, his face etched with the lines of a man who'd lost his spread to Voss's schemes. He'd spotted the convoy from his hilltop watch, drawn by the engine's hymn. "Heard you at Ilara's," he rasped, eyes flicking to June with a nod of respect. "My boy's one of the silenced. Gave a statement last year. Saw Voss's men roughing up a family on the east lots. They took the tape, but I kept a copy." He pulled a small drive from his pocket, offering it like contraband. Isaac took it, the plastic cool against his palm, feeling the weight of alliances forming in the arroyo's hush. Tomas's arrival wasn't chance. It was the ripple of their careful ride, drawing the broken to the light. "Join us," Isaac said, clapping the man's shoulder. "Iron Promise rides for this, for the ones the system chews up. No grand speeches, just the simple truth of chosen bonds, stronger than blood or badges." As the sun dipped lower, painting the canyon walls in fiery oranges, they pooled the evidence: ledger, papers, drive. Marco sketched a timeline on a scrap of paper, connections spiderwebbing out, Jake's death as the spark, Lena's probe as the fuse, Voss's empire as the powder keg. But doubt flickered in Isaac's chest, a moral snag. Exposing this could shatter lives, drag innocence into the fray. "We do this clean," he said, meeting each brother's eyes. "No corners cut. For Jake, for Lena, for her." He nodded to June, who met his gaze with a small, fierce smile, the first real one since the motel. Twilight crept in, stars pricking the sky like distant promises. They mounted up, the safe house serving its purpose, a pause to forge the path ahead. Engines ignited in sequence, a controlled thunder that rolled through the arroyo, carrying them back toward Red Hollow's edge. But now, with Thomas trailing on his battered truck, the convoy felt heavier, laden with the momentum of truth uncoiling. Voss's grip was iron, but promises like theirs were forged in fire, unbreakable and ready to bend the world toward justice. The road ahead twisted, but Isaac rode steady, June's trust a warmth against his back. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was this ride, mile by mile, honoring the oaths that time couldn't erase. If this chapter stirred something in you, hit that like button below. It helps spread these stories of honor and heart to more riders on the road. The twilight bled into night as the convoy crested the arroyo's rim, engines purring like watchful guardians against the deepening indigo sky. Isaac led the pack now, his Harley cutting a steady line through the scrub-dotted flats, June's presence a quiet anchor behind him, her arms secure, her silence speaking volumes of the trust she'd placed in this makeshift family. The air cooled with the fading light, carrying the sharp bite of creosote bushes and the faint, acrid whisper of distant campfires, as if the desert itself sensed the gathering storm. Thomas's truck rumbled in the rear, its headlights slicing the gloom like hesitant beacons. The USB drive now shared among the brothers, a digital thread weaving deeper into Voss's web. They skirted Red Hollow's glow, the town's sodium lamps flickering like wary eyes on the horizon, and veered toward the old courthouse on the outskirts, a squat brick relic from better days, its clock tower frozen at 3:30, a monument to stalled time. Reyes had scouted it years ago, back when his badge meant something. The county clerk's back entrance, he said, held public records that could corroborate the ledger. No raid, no drama, just quiet access. Copies made under the cover of night, turning shadows into allies. Voss's influence stops at the door. Reyes murmured over the comms, his voice crackling through earpieces jury-rigged from bike radios. But the night watchman? He's one of the coerced, might talk if we show him the light. Isaac nodded into the wind. the vibration of the engine thrumming through his bones, sinking with the pulse of resolve. The papers in his vest felt alive, rustling faintly with each bump, a chorus of silenced voices urging him forward. Jake's promise had been a whisper in a sterile room, but here, amid the growl of iron promise, it roared. Chosen kin, bound not by blood, but by the unyielding code of keeping one's word. June shifted slightly, her cheek brushing the leather of his vest, and he felt the weight of her aunt's absence. The girl's steady breath a reminder that failure wasn't an option anymore. The courthouse loomed as they approached, its facade etched with the patina of neglect, ivy clawing at the mortar like desperate fingers. They killed the engines a block out, the sudden hush amplifying the night's subtle symphony, crickets rasping in the underbrush, a lone owl's call slicing the quiet. Jax and Marco flanked the group, their forms blending into the gloom as they posted watch, while Thomas hung back with his truck, engine idling low. June stayed close to Isaac, her small hand slipping into his as they slipped through the side gate, the metal creaking like a reluctant confession. Inside, the clerk's office smelled of musty paper and stale coffee, fluorescent hum casting a pallid glow over filing cabinets that sagged like weary sentinels. The night watchman, a wiry man in his 60s named Harlan, no relation to Voss, thank the stars, froze at the intrusion, his flashlight beam trembling across their faces. "Who the hell?" he started, voice quavering, but Reyes stepped forward, hands open, the ex-cop's posture disarming as a steady hand. "Easy, Harlan. We're not here for trouble. Name's Reyes. You remember me? Worked a case here 5 years back, the mill fire." The watchman's eyes widened, recognition flickering like a shorted bulb. Reyes pulled the ledger from his pack, laying it open on the desk amid the scatter of forms and rubber stamps. "This yours? Voss's shadow all over it. We know what they did. Pressured you to shred files, bury reports. But look." He tapped the USB drive, plugged into an ancient computer that whirred to life with a groan. Files bloomed on the screen. Grainy footage of Voss's men at the east lots. Shadows suggesting aggression without the gore. Voices muffled but damning. Threats to families. Demands for signatures. Harlan's face crumpled, the lines deepening as he sank into a creaky chair, the wood protesting under his weight. The air thickened with the scent of his sweat and regret, the room's single window rattling faintly in the breeze. "They came after my daughter," he whispered, eyes darting to the door. "Said she'd lose her job at the school if I didn't play along." Erased Jake Calder's inquiry, the one about the road seizure. He was onto them, same as that girl, Lena. I let it slide." His confession hung there, raw and unpolished, a crack in the town's armored silence. Isaac felt the old scars tighten across his chest, Jake's dying grip vivid in the dim light. "You can fix it now," he said, voice low and even, like the calm before a long ride. "Copy what you can. Jake's file, the land transfers. Voss's empire crumbles if the truth sees daylight. For your daughter. For all of them." June squeezed his hand, her presence a silent vote of faith, her eyes reflecting the screen's glow like stars in a troubled sky. Harlan hesitated, fingers hovering over the keys, the keyboard's clicks echoing like hesitant footsteps. Minutes stretched, the computer's fan whirring louder as files transferred. Deeds, emails, a hidden audit trail leading straight to Voss's safe house on the hill. But then headlights swept the window, tires crunching gravel outside. Deputies. Word had spread, or perhaps a silent alarm tripped in the watchman's doubt. Jax's voice crackled over the comms. "Company, 2 cars, blocking the lane. No sirens, quiet takedown." Tension coiled in the room, thick as the dust motes swirling in the beam of Harlan's forgotten flashlight. Reyes unplugged the drive, pocketing it with the fresh copies, while Marco guided Harlan to a side exit. "Go home," Marco urged, his medic's touch firm on the man's shoulder. "Tell no one. We'll handle the rest." The watchman nodded, vanishing into the night like a ghost absolved, leaving the office in disarray, a tipped chair, papers askew, as testament to the night's work. They slipped out the back, hearts pounding in rhythm with their boots on the dewy grass. The cool night air, a sharp contrast to the office's stuffiness. The deputies' voices carried low from the front. Searches, assumptions of vandals, but Iron Promise moved as one, melting into the shadows toward their bikes. June ran beside Isaac, her breaths quick but controlled, the thrill of the close call lighting her face with a fierce spark. No shots, no confrontation, just evasion, the moral high ground their shield. As they reached the convoy, engines firing in muffled sequence to avoid alarm, Thomas waved them on from his truck. The group peeled away into the Arroyo's embrace once more, the new evidence burning hotter than before, a full map now, from Jake's overlooked plea to Lena's final notes, all pointing to Voss's vault of secrets. But in the rear view, Isaac caught the flash of patrol lights scattering like startled fireflies, the pursuit not ended but evolving. Doubt gnawed at him. Exposure could free the town, but at what cost to June, to Harlan's kin? The promise demanded balance, justice without ruin, honor in the grey. Dawn's first threads laced the eastern sky as they regrouped in the alcove, the Arroyo's walls a fortress of stone and resolve. Jax spread the copies on the boulder, the group's faces illuminated by a single lantern's glow. Shadows playing across determined lines. "We take it to the state line," Jack said, folding the map with care. "Quiet ride north, hand it off to clean hands. Voss can't touch that far." Isaac nodded, pulling June close, her head resting against his side. The road ahead promised trials, but in this circle of leathers and loyalty, redemption felt within reach, one truthful mile at a time. The desert stirred awake, a coyote's distant yip echoing their defiance as the convoy prepared to roll. Voss's shadows lengthened, but the light of kept promises cut deeper, unraveling the lies thread by unyielding thread. The first light of dawn clawed its way over the Arroyo's jagged rim, casting long shadows that stretched like accusing fingers across the alcove's floor. Isaac stood amid the circle of bikes, the lantern's dying flicker painting the brothers' faces in stark contrasts of resolve and weariness. June huddled close to Marco, her small frame dwarfed by his steady presence, as they pored over the freshly copied files spread across the boulder. The air hung heavy with the night's chill, laced with the sharp, resinous scent of mesquite snapping in a hidden fire pit Thomas had kindled, a practical warmth against the desert's bite, but also a beacon of fragile camaraderie. Reyes traced a finger along the audit trail, his voice a low rumble cutting through the morning hush. "Voss's safe house on the hill, that's the endgame. These emails confirm it. Encrypted transfers to offshore accounts, all tied to the mayor's sign-off. But the watchman's copies add the human cost. Emails from scared folks, begging for extensions on deeds that were never theirs to lose." He paused, eyes lifting to meet Isaac's, the weight of shared history unspoken but palpable. The ex-cop's badge might be long gone, but the fire for righting wrongs burned steady, a flame kindled in the same forge that had shaped Iron Promise. Isaac nodded, the paper's edges crisp under his calloused thumb, each one a shard of the puzzle Lena had died trying to complete. The USB drive, now duplicated and sealed, felt like a live wire in his pocket, hot with potential, dangerous if mishandled. Jake's face haunted him again, not in accusation now, but in quiet urging. "Don't let me down." The promise had pulled him from the motel's isolation, through barns and diners, into this hidden fold where chosen family stood shoulder to shoulder. But as the sun crested, gilding the canyon walls in pale gold, a low vibration stirred the dust. Not engines, but the distant thrum of approaching vehicles, tires devouring the scrub like hungry predators. Jax straightened, his massive form tensing as he scanned the trail. "Company, not ours." The words rippled through the group, boots shifting on gravel, hands instinctively checking saddlebags. Tomas doused the fire with a quick stomp, embers hissing into silence, while Marco guided June behind a cluster of boulders, her eyes wide but unafraid, trust forged in the night's evasions. The convoy had drawn eyes. Voss's reach extended like roots through Red Hollow's soil, and now those roots were closing in. 3 black SUVs crested the rim, dust plumes trailing like war banners, their engines' growl echoing off the stone until the vehicles halted in a blocking arc. Doors slammed and figures emerged, Voss's private security, clad in tactical vests that screamed hired muscle rather than law. No badges, just the cold gleam of sidearms holstered low, and at their head a slick-haired man in a tailored jacket, Harlan Voss himself, his face a mask of calculated calm, eyes like polished obsidian reflecting the dawn. "Well, well," Voss called, his voice carrying smooth as oil over water, stepping forward with hands visible but posture commanding. "Iron promise stirring dust in my backyard. Heard you've been chatting up my neighbors. Care to share what's got you so invested?" The air thickened, the scent of exhaust mingling with the acrid tang of tension as his men fanned out, forming a loose semicircle that hemmed the alcove without overt threat yet. Isaac stepped to the fore, the brothers flanking him in a wall of leather and unyielding silence, engines still cold but ready. June peeked from her cover, her breath a faint hitch in the quiet, but Isaac's presence steadied her like an anchor chain. He met Voss's gaze, unflinching, the photo of Lena burning in his mind's eye, her smile, the bike, the promise it embodied. "No chat," Isaac replied, tone even as a tuned idol, "just following threads. Yours, mostly. Land that wasn't yours to take, voices you silenced. Jake Calder's road, Lena's questions, rings a bell." Voss's smile didn't reach his eyes, a flicker of unease betraying the facade as he glanced at the boulder, the scattered papers catching the light like exposed veins. "Old history, friend. Accidents happen, deals get made. Red Hollow thrives because of men like me. Progress over sentiment." But his voice edged sharper, the bluff thinning as Reyes subtly shifted, angling his body to shield the evidence. The brothers held formation, no aggression, just the quiet weight of witnesses, veterans who'd stared down worse than a developer's ego, bound by oaths that violence couldn't touch. One of Voss's men edged closer, boots scuffing a pebble that skittered toward Marco, but Jax's low growl halted him, a sound more primal than words, echoing the canyon's depths. June emerged then, stepping beside Isaac with deliberate slowness, her small voice slicing the standoff like a clear desert wind. "Aunt Lena said you build on lies," she stated, chin lifted, the bruise on her cheek a faint shadow in the growing light. "But lies crack, like this place." Her words hung, simple and piercing, drawing a murmur from Tomas behind them. Another thread pulled, another ally in the open. Voss's composure fractured, his eyes narrowing on the girl, a flash of calculation crossing his features. "Kid's got spirit, but spirit don't pay bills. Hand over whatever you've scavenged and we call it even. No need for escalation." The implication lingered, heavy as the dust settling around their boots, but Isaac felt the shift, the man's bluff exposed, the evidence too damning to seize without witnesses. Iron Promise wasn't a gang to brawl. They were the light that made shadows flee. "We ride north," Isaac said, voice steady, gesturing to the bikes. "State investigators wait. Your web unravels from here, clean by the book. Or we let the town see it all first." He tapped his vest where the copies rested, a silent vow. Voss hesitated, the SUV's engines idling like impatient beasts, his men glancing between leader and the unmovable line of bikers. The moral snare tightened. Attack now, and the story spread, corrupt developer ambushing a child and her guardians. Retreat, and the evidence flew free. Seconds stretched, the sun climbing higher, warming the stone until sweat beaded on Voss's brow. Finally he stepped back, a curt nod to his crew. "Your funeral," he spat, but the words rang hollow, retreat masked as dismissal. The SUVs reversed, tires churning gravel in a hasty cloud, vanishing over the rim as quickly as they'd come. The alcove exhaled, the tension uncoiling like a release spring, but the victory tasted of ash. Voss wouldn't fade quietly. Isaac turned to the group, clasping forearms in silent affirmation, the brotherhood's bond a tangible force amid the morning's clarity. June's hand found his again, her squeeze a quiet triumph. "You faced him," she whispered, awe threading her tone. Marco packed the evidence, sealing it with finality, while Jax fired the first engine, a deep, resonant call to motion. They mounted up, the convoy rolling out in disciplined waves, the Arroyo's walls falling away to reveal the open road north. The desert bloomed under the sun, sagebrush whispering approval as Isaac led the way. Redemption's path wasn't straight, but with Jake's promise kept, Lena's truth unearthed, and June safe in the saddle, it stretched toward justice, one engine's roar at a time. Voss's shadows pursued, but the light of exposure outpaced them, promises enduring like the endless horizon. The convoy sliced through the morning's golden haze, engines humming a steady cadence that blended with the desert's awakening chorus, coyotes fading into silence, the first hawks wheeling overhead on thermals rising like unspoken prayers. Isaac rode point, the wind tugging at his vest, carrying the faint, clean scent of dew-kissed sage and the underlying bite of sun-warmed earth. June's arms encircled his waist, her grip looser now, a subtle shift from fear to the quiet assurance of motion forward. Behind them the brothers formed a rolling phalanx, Jax's broad silhouette, a steadfast shadow, Reyes scanning the mirrors for tails, Marco and Thomas bringing up the rear with the evidence sealed in reinforced packs, ledgers, drives, copies that formed an unbreakable chain of truth. Red Hollow shrank in the rear view, its spires and streets dissolving into a mirage of dust and regret. But Isaac felt no triumph yet, only the measured weight of a promise cresting its final hill. Jake's words echoed with the road's rhythm. "Family's what you choose." He'd chosen exile once, letting miles and machines bury the oath. But this ride, through barns and arroyos, diners and shadows, had forged it anew. Lena's photo, tucked in his inner pocket, fluttered like a heartbeat against his chest. Her smile no longer a ghost, but a guidepost. June's breath warmed his back, steady and trusting, a living testament to redemption's quiet pull. They crossed the state line by mid-morning, the border marker a weathered sign half obscured by tumbleweeds, its paint chipped like old scabs. No fanfare, just the subtle shift in asphalt texture under tires. The air growing crisper, with hints of pine from distant hills. Reyes led them to a nondescript ranger station off the highway, its log walls blending into the landscape like a secret kept. Inside, under the hum of fluorescent lights and the aroma of fresh-brewed coffee from a communal pot, waited Agent Clara Hale, a no-nonsense investigator with sharp eyes and a file of her own on Voss's dealings, fed by anonymous tips that now converged. Hale met them in the gravel lot, her badge glinting in the sun as she clasped forearms with Reyes, old acquaintances from cross-state cases. "Heard rumblings," she said, voice clipped but warm with purpose, scanning the convoy with professional appraisal. No judgments on the leathers or the engines. She'd seen enough to know justice wore many faces. Isaac dismounted, helping June down with a gentleness born of the night's trials, her sneakers hitting the ground with a soft crunch. She stood tall, clutching a small backpack, Lena's, reclaimed from the motel's shadows, its strap worn from journeys unfinished. "We brought the pieces," Isaac said, handing over the sealed bundle. The weight lifted from his hands felt symbolic. Like shedding rusted chains. Hale spread the contents on a folding table dragged outside, the breeze riffling pages as she absorbed the ledger's entries, the drive's footage flickering on a laptop screen. Shadows of coercion, voices pleading in the grainy dark, trails leading inexorably to Voss's vault. June pointed out details, her voice gaining strength. That's the farm Aunt Lena mapped. And here, the payout after Uncle Jake's road. Hale nodded, her pen scratching notes, the scratch like a key turning in a long locked door. By noon, the station buzzed with activity, faxes humming to federal offices, calls routing to prosecutors beyond Voss's reach. Tomas lingered by his truck, sharing a quiet word with Hale about his son's statement, his shoulders easing for the first time in years. The brothers stood sentinel, sipping water from canteens, the sun climbing to bake the lot in waves of heat that shimmered like unresolved tension. But as Hale pieced it together, the moral architecture solidified. Not just land grabs, but a syndicate preying on the vulnerable, Jake's accident reframed as targeted elimination, Lena's vanishing as the silencing of a whistleblower. Exposure, not force, would dismantle it. Raids on Voss's properties, arrests cascading like dominoes. Voss's call came as the sun arced westward, his number flashing on Reyes's burner phone, voice oily through the speaker held aloft for all to hear. "This ends now," he snarled, the alcove confrontation's bluff fully shattered. "You think papers scare me? Red Hollow's mine." But Hale took the line, her tone steel-wrapped calm. "It's over, Harlan. Warrants are en route. Your web's lit up, every thread." A pause, then a click, the silence that followed louder than any roar. The brothers exchanged nods, the air electric with the thrill of unraveling, engines idling like patient hounds. June tugged Isaac's sleeve, her eyes reflecting the laptop's glow. "She'd be proud," she said, meaning Lena, the words a bridge across loss. Isaac knelt, the gravel biting his knees, and pulled her into a brief hug, the first unguarded one, scented with leather and desert dust. "We all are," he murmured, Jake's promise fulfilled in the embrace. Iron promise wasn't saviors in capes. They were the steady hum beneath the storm, chosen family weaving honor into the world's frayed edges. As dusk painted the hills in bruised purples, Hale confirmed the first arrests. Deputies in cuffs, Voss's safe house breached, assets frozen under lights that exposed every hidden ledger. Red Hollow would heal slowly, farms reclaimed, voices amplified. But the grip had broken, not with engines roaring in rage, but with truth's patient grind. The convoy mounted up one last time, bound for scattered horizons, but Isaac rode with June toward a new chapter, perhaps a home beyond the motel's ghosts, her aunt's bike waiting in storage, ready for restoration. The road unspooled north, stars emerging like promises kept. The desert's vastness, a canvas for legacies etched in chrome and conscience. Isaac glanced back once, Red Hollow a fading speck, then forward to redemption's endless ride, where oaths outlasted the dust. Thank you for riding this journey with us. If stories of unbreakable promises and chosen roads touch your soul, subscribe for more tales that honor the heart of the open highway.